Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zones. I see, Eleanor, you are in London. Likewise, so I'm going to call this a good afternoon. In case anyone is celebrating Gong Hei Fa Choi, and I'm wearing my lucky red shirt in celebration of the Year of the Tiger with Chinese New Year. So indeed, we are a very small group, but deliberately so. I believe this was billed as an exclusive event to give that sense of prestige about this event. So ask me, there we go. Ask me anything. There's always a bit of a gamble because, of course, I have no idea which questions are going to be forthcoming. But before we delve into the ARMA, Candice, is that the correct pronunciation of the acronym ARMA, AMA? Or does it not have AMA or just AMA? Say the letters.
I say AMA, but to each his own.
Okay. AMA. Ask me anything. So I prepared. I'm hoping at least one of the questions is, what's my favorite color? Because I can field that one fairly confidently. So before we launch into that segment, let me perhaps just give a little bit of a autobiography. So hi, my name is James Abdey. I am a full-time member of faculty at the LSE, so the London School of Economics and Political Science. Indeed, I am a product of the LSE. X years ago, I will leave you to come up with your own numerical estimate of X. I was a PhD student in statistics at LSE, and no doubt perhaps a career progression will be one of our themes today. So why did I do a PhD in the first place? Well, I offer myself up as a case study in that your career trajectories can be somewhat unpredictable, in that I began the PhD with the intention of completing it and then going off to earn a telephone number sized salary in the sort of banking and finance sector. But little did I know when I began that I would undertake some tutorials, so class teaching opportunities in the lean years as a PhD student. And during those, I really discovered my love and passion for teaching. So I completed the thesis. Someone in my department retired, they needed a lecturer and I needed a job. So really that was a perfect match. And I've been at the LSE ever since. So in my day-to-day job, it is to lecture students, be it face-to-face or in a more hybrid format more recently on mainly our undergraduate programs. But I've been heavily involved with what we call our extended education unit, which looks at alternative educational offerings by LSE. So that involves things like summer school, executive programs, and we've been pioneering, and I think legitimately using that word pioneering, one of the I think first the UK universities to really branch out into the digital sphere with our sort of e-educational offerings. So with regards to our LSE Data Analytics online career accelerator, this is LSE's first foray, in fact, into the career accelerator model. So I wear various hats, as it were, with regards to the career accelerator. It says, it's the opposite way around to what I think it is. Ta-da! There we go, with the disappearing hand. As course convener, and one of 5 course conveners, so all LSE faculty members are charged with designing the course materials that you would study from. But I also serve as academic program coordinator, so it's a mouthful of a title, APC, we love acronyms in academia, such that I have sort of general academic oversight of the career accelerator more generally. So it's a new type of educational offering. Indeed, it's so new that to date we just have our first cohort, and they began in January. They had about 2 weeks of onboarding and orientation, and indeed yesterday, the 31st of Jan, they embarked on their first sort of full week of instruction as part of the course. I've had the pleasure of meeting them last week. I was part of a panel discussion billed as a masterclass to sort of formally welcome the learners onto the Career Accelerator, and just to help to start to set the expectations, be they both academic but also practical, with a strong industry focus as well. So I was asked to join an AMA, as I think we will now officially designate such events, to give you the opportunity to ask me literally anything, although I have a support team on standby to field any questions that I'm unable to bluff my way through. So indeed, we are a small and select group, of quality over quantity, of course. So please feel free to literally ask me anything. I would suggest Career Accelerator oriented, and happy to field any queries. And I should say, in terms of asking questions, you're welcome to do so either through the chat Q&A function, or if you're feeling brave, you may unmute and ask orally. I'll accept any method. Oh, I think we have our first one in our Q&A.
Before we jump into that, James, I wanted to ask, do you want to run the poll quickly?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm in the excitement of the matter. Of course we have to. It's a data analytics, data collection exercise. Candice, over to you. Or do you want me to introduce the segment? So on screen, you should be seeing a small icebreaker poll question. Feel free to answer away. Interesting, because I can see the results in real time as they're coming in. And I suspect you can only see your own option that you've voted for. Okay, Candice, please, thank you for stopping. Let me share. The results should be appearing on screen. So admittedly, it's an online career accelerator. So it's literally an online form of learning. And I'm sure over the last couple of years, we've all become super familiar with platforms such as Zoom, and just a little fun ice-breaking activity. Now, I'm designated as a panelist in this session, so I was not allowed to vote. Had I actually would have answered the bottom one of others, but my lips are sealed, and literally they will remain sealed. You can tell at least, certainly from the top half, I am not wearing pajamas. I will go that far, and I'm not eating breakfast or an afternoon snack or anything at present. So just to critique this, if I may, at a very sort of superficial level, clearly the data analytics career accelerator heavily involves data, yet data comes in many different shapes and forms, which you would be learning about extensively over the 6-month period. Structured versus unstructured data, particularly with a commercial flavor. If we think about, say, like an e-commerce giant, I shall name no names, they'll have their digitally recorded data, for example, of transactions, who bought what, when, how much did they pay, etc. But that sort of is an example of what I might think of as behavioral data, as in we can observe, let's say, people's shopping behavior. But if I want to have a sense of people's attitudes, opinions, tastes, or preferences on things, typically I would need to survey them. And so this very simple poll, I mean, just although it's very small, there's many key takeaways from this. First of all, response rates. We've had a 3 of 4, so 75% participation rate. Frankly, in survey collection, that is excessively high. In practice, you would be doing very well if you got a response rate anything over about 10 or 20%. So, of course, when there's not full participation, there's a potential for non-response bias. People who don't participate, really one has no idea what their answers would have been. And especially when the response rate is very low, caution about generalizing more widely. Indeed, you are a very select audience, and clearly you all have some at least early interests in the data sphere. And so to what extent are you representative of you humans more generally? And of course, you would be far more data savvy, technologically savvy, whereas other people around the world may not be regularly engaging in online meetings. The simple conversion of the data points of frequency count. So 2 responded that they wore pajamas. 1 was cooking lunch or dinner. I don't know if you're doing that right now. If so, I hope it's tasty. But a number by itself is always meaningless. One always needs some benchmark or reference point to give it some context. Now, at a very elementary level, rather than looking at 2 respondents saying wore pajamas, the simple conversion to a percentage, 2 out of how many, in this case 2 out of 3, and hence 67%. And so that gives a more marginally more meaningful insight. So, okay, well, there we go. And indeed, were those answers honest? Just because those were our 3 data points, and I'm not suggesting you are being economical with the truth in those responses, yet maybe the honest answer, certainly for me at least, would have been the final one. And so just because one gives a response doesn't necessarily mean it's a truthful response. So biases in data come in many shapes and forms. Selection bias, who are you looking at? Response bias, so maybe untruthful responses. Non-response bias, not everyone participating. And it's rare, particularly in survey matters, that you get sort of clean, reliable data, and so various adjustments one may wish to make. Okay, I think we'll put that whole question to one side. Candice, would you like to moderate the questions, or put me to launch into them?
I think we do have a brave soul who would like to ask. Eleonora, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Oh, please do, please do.
Ask directly.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good. Hi, thank you for hosting this webinar. And I have several questions. Like I would say the most pressing one is, what is the LSE approach towards ethics and data analytics?
Oh, great. You said a few. Do you want to ask them all at once, or and I'll.
The other is this course for professionals who work already in the industry, or is it a valid option for those looking for a career change?
Okay.
And the last one is, do you provide assistance after the course for job placement?
Okay, I'll touch on those perhaps in reverse order as my brain works. So in terms of support, so during the 6 months of the Career Accelerator itself, you would have access to a career coach to guide you, and the nature of the coaching would be student or learner specific, and so everyone's needs will be different, but this will be a more personalized service. You would have a one-to-one session with them at the very start of the Career Accelerator, so they can be more, so you can discuss your particular career hopes and aspirations, and they can give you coaching throughout those 6 months. To the extent to which you post the event, I can't give a certainty on that, but I would expect some sort of alumni support network longer term. We are just having our first cohort started now, so as yet there are no alumni of the program. The second question, just my memory, was about, is it for working professionals or other? It's open really to all. I would say of this first cohort, for the majority, they will be working professionals, but it's not, we are not preventing access to others. But our main entry criteria would be the expectation of a graduate degree in some fields, typically with at least one quantitative module in there, like sort of mathematics or statistics 101, to demonstrate some preliminary quantitative proficiency, but there'll be others who perhaps bypassed university altogether, have many years work experience, but not a graduate degree, and applications will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, it tends to be in our first cohort working professionals, themselves at various stages. So this is quite a heterogeneous cohort of students, and I would expect that in future intakes as well. Some are looking to reskill, so they have some basic data expertise, but wish to take that to the next level. To upskill, sorry. Some will be looking to reskill in that they have expertise in a different field, but are aware of and appreciate the importance of data in decision making and want to sort of put their toe in the water with regards to that. I would say, given that most are working professionals, and indeed most would have been graduates, that means all learners have nearly all learners have experience of university style learning. But if they've been in the workplace for several years, working and studying are requiring different demands of the brain. And so particularly in the orientation and the early part of course one, it's about getting people back into like a study mode. So we are very much open to all. The skill sets at the start of the Career Accelerator will vary greatly among learners. And indeed that diversity is a great strength of the program. There'll be many opportunities to collaborate with your peers. And whereas one person may have a bit more coding expertise coming into the program, others may be a bit more well-versed in sort of with communication skills, delivering presentations, etc. So opportunities really for learners to learn from each other as well. And your opening question was on data ethics and integrity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So of course, well, not just LSE, I would say all credible institutions should take this extremely seriously, and ingrained within the curriculum, not necessarily every week, but we will allude to issues of data security, protecting your data. Candice mentioned that at the start of this session with regards to the AMA, also with the dissemination of data. And actually we held an AMA session this morning, and a good question that came up in that session was about the use and also misuse, not by LSE I say, but in general, the use and misuse of data, such that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, and that's of course very much true. So we train you to be objective users of data. For example, if you were to create a dashboard, make sure that what's presented is not misleading in any way, but also to be able to call out misuse of data or how data are presented by other parties. So, I mean, the misinformation in the digital age, I mean, it's not a problem I think humanity will erase overnight, but the more people we train in objective forms of data analysis, presentation, and sort of the commentary they give on that data, the better. So yes, treatment is given to the data ethics, particularly towards the final week of course one. There's a segment on that, but that will be a sort of recurring theme throughout the Accelerator.
Thank you.
Thanks. I actually also just want to add quickly just to the first question the third question you had. The first question James answered.
First answered.
Yes, just in terms of the community that you are a part of when you join the Career Accelerator, that is something you continue to be a part of post Accelerator as well. So in the same way you'll have access to your coaches and experts and people within that community, that will be taken forward post your completion, and you'll still be able to get a lot of the same value that you did during through the community. I hope that also answers your question.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Okay, I will turn to the I think some of the chat, some of the Q&A. I'll hop to the Q&A window. I will look at this at the upvotes. One is I'd be really interested to hear whether data languages I learn are future-proof. I love that term, future-proof, or will they only be useful for a limited amount of time? Well, of course, the future is highly uncertain. Allegedly, the only certainties in life I think of was death and taxes, and for me, sometimes computer crashes. So, what's the future of the sort of labor market 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or beyond? And of course, any of us today can make a prediction, and time will tell to what extent they are proven right or wrong. But data languages, perhaps I'll rephrase this slightly, perhaps in terms of maybe programming or coding languages. Again, excellent question, and something similar this morning for me at least. And I offered up an analogy in that let's just consider languages, human languages, spoken languages as a starting point. I mean, globally, there must be probably tens of thousands of languages or dialects, maybe some only spoken by a very small number of individuals. And if you are lucky to be a polyglot, in which case I'm deeply envious, I did study spoken languages, but Y or Z years ago, and I'm very rusty on them. Even one of the world's leading polyglots, there's a limit as to how many languages they could ever be reasonably fluent in a lifespan. And likewise with programming or coding languages, no one's ever going to be an expert in everything. Now, what does the future look like with regards to programming languages? I can make a prediction as can anyone, but of course it's not guaranteed to come to fruition. We can certainly look historically, looking at the trends for popularity of languages. And it seems, particularly in the last few years, Python has tended to be a popular tool of choice. And indeed, in part because of that, and current demands of industry, current demands don't guarantee future demands. But I think for the foreseeable future, let's say the next 5 to 10 years, it's somewhat foolish to predict much beyond that time horizon, that Python will seem to be a very popular choice. And that is why in course 2 of the Career Accelerator, there is a strong grounding in Python. But many of you will be aware there are other languages out there. And indeed, in course 3, focusing more on advanced analytics, alongside Python, there is the introduction of R. So my analogy with spoken languages is that you will never know them all, but the more languages you are familiar with, particularly within a particular family of languages, I think the easier it is to acquire new languages on a need to know, need to use, or need to speak basis. So I'm fairly Euro-centric, so my long ago proficiency in some European languages would mean if I put in the time and effort, and I doubt I ever will, but if I did, I would feel reasonably confident in picking up new languages of the same sort of family. And I think the same applies to sort of programming, coding languages. The more you learn, the easier it is to pick up on new ones on a need to know, need to use basis. But one has to always be grounded and have realistic expectations. No one ever knows everything. But I would say Python seems at the moment, and hence for the foreseeable future, seems to be a real leading choice. And indeed, that's why we tend to have more of a Python than R focus in the Career Accelerator. Well, linking on that, just my eye has been caught. Do you foresee data analysis as a critical skill within the next 50 years? So a 50-year time horizon. It's great. I'm very happy to make predictions today about what will happen in 50 years time, because I can't be proven wrong in those for the next 50 years. So very long-term predictions, forecasts would be are always quite a safe bet, because we're depending 100 or 200 years future, I am unlikely to be around to have to face the consequences if I end up being very wrong. So well, let's make some projections for the next 50 years. You are welcome to agree or disagree. You have perhaps heard a lot about automation of jobs. I think there's a lot of hype around that. And but nonetheless, it's I think a reality today. But different sectors or different kinds of job roles are more susceptible to automation than others. And looking out for the next 10, 20, okay, let's go for 50 years. I think the demand for humans, machines are clever, but they lack empathy, and I can't see humans, machines replacing humans in my lifetime is my bet. I mean, well into the future, who knows? So I think the demand for people with the right quantitative skills to make sense of data. A computer can follow an algorithm and just do what it's told, but we need that human element of common sense to be able to draw out useful, practical business insights from the data. And I think for all of us on this call, I don't know your ages, but anticipating your expected length of career going forward, I think that demand is not going to dissipate. If anything, it's just going to increase, certainly in the next 5, 10, 15 years time horizon. And sort of economics 101, demand supply. Demand from industry, public sector as well. By no means is this exclusively the private sector domain. Demand vastly outstrips supply, meaning supply of people, graduates or working professionals with the requisite skills. And in Econ 101, when demand exceeds supply, the price goes up. And the price, of course, in this instance would be the salaries that individuals can command. And I can foresee continued strictly increase of demand. While supply will be increasing, I don't think it's going to be increasing at the rate to keep pace with demand. And hence, for all of us here, I think this is very much good news in that we are in an in-demand sector today. And I think certainly for the next, let's say 10 years, playing for 50 years as well, that demand will remain. Oh, and I should just link to that actually. I mean, regularly, and don't just take it from me. I mean, look at reports by organizations like the World Economic Forum, The Economist. They will routinely sort of publish report, and various consultancies, Ernst & Young, etc., Accenture, will frequently publish reports on the state of the labor market, the jobs of the present, and also the future. And you will tend to see that data related jobs, a data analyst or business analyst in a fairly loosely defined way for now, those sorts of positions regularly feature in demand jobs now, but also of the future. Right, okay, you're very good with these questions, asking me anything, keeping me on my toes. Next one, Atif, what would be academic equivalent of this program? Will it be considered a postgraduate diploma? Excellent, excellent question. So now this is a bespoke program whereby we are blending the academics in terms of the LSE side, but also the practical and industry focus, and that's where FourthRev is coming in. And indeed, numerous masterclasses hosted by various experts in the field. So where is it sort of positioned in the hierarchy of qualifications as such? Excellent question. So I would say a good way of thinking about this. Most participants will have been graduates, so they went to university X years ago, and studied whatever a discipline, but by no means all learners have a degree. So we are thinking of this, for the most part, as sort of being a postgraduate learning opportunity. It is not a full master's degree. Indeed, there was a question in the AMA this morning from a prospective learner who is looking to enroll on a full master's program and potentially a PhD thereafter, and was inquiring how beneficial this career accelerator would be in pursuing those endeavors. And if I may, I'll sort of frame the question in that light. And they said, basically, what advantage would the career accelerator give in that setting? And my response was, well, and particularly they were keen to come to LSE for their masters. I said, well, fun fact, I love fun facts. LSE is first and foremost a postgraduate university we have more master students than we do undergraduate students. And in that sense, we are very special because almost all universities, their undergraduate cohorts dominate. And as such, it's a very competitive entry process. And indeed, of all reputable universities around the world, so ignoring any potential nepotism, admissions to master's programs is done on a competitive entry basis. And a postgraduate cohort is always far more demographically diverse than for an undergraduate cohort. When I say demographically, principally in terms of age. Most people enrolling on undergraduate programs, 17, borderline 18, 19, maybe they took a gap year. So the variation of ages for undergraduates is quite minimal. Whereas for master's degrees, some master's students, they enroll straight off the back of their undergraduate studies, but many will have taken several years of work experience, and when they feel the time is right for them, they enroll. And so it is a highly competitive process. And so something like this Career Accelerator is, I think, a great signal to master's admissions officers. And I think let's link this to employment as well. Maybe you're keen just to go off into the real world of work. And this Career Accelerator, having it on your CV, on your resume, I think it's fair to say would give you a competitive edge. I mean, there are no certainties in matters of gaining specific job positions or places on master's degrees or PhDs or anything else, but it's all about maximizing your probability of success. And I mean, for me, because I've been heavily involved in the design of the curriculum and the style of learning on the Accelerator, it's this blend of the academic and the practical. Because if I'm honest, most universities or in-house exclusive programs tend to be quite abstract and academic in nature. Maybe fine if you wish to signal your intelligence, but in terms of then being able to make a real impact in a job in the real world, often standard university programs are perhaps not optimized for that outcome. Whereas with this Career Accelerator, very much links to industry and industry input. We've had a lot of expert advisors on making sure that what people learn over the 6 months is a practical use for businesses. So I appreciate, sorry, a convoluted answer to this. So now how is a Career Accelerator really perceived? I suppose that's another way of framing the question. It's still quite a new style of learning. Indeed, I mean, this is LSE's very first foray into the field of career accelerators. And I'll be honest, before I was invited to be involved with it, I had not heard of the term career accelerator previously. Now I probably use it multiple times a day in various meetings with individuals. So I'm very aware of it, but perhaps beyond those of us in this call, what is the awareness of a career accelerator among master's admissions officers or HR departments at various organizations? Perhaps fair to say it's patchy, but I can see this model of career accelerator growing in prominence and therefore wider awareness going forward. Now, as and when you market yourself to an employer or a master's admissions officer, whatever the next stage for you would be, I mean, and this is where the career coaches and success managers will be able to assist with you and prepare you for this. But you do, of course, need to be able to market yourself well. And it's how you can basically convince an interviewer, say, that you are right for a particular position. And particularly for roles with a heavy data flavor, which I'm guessing you would all be looking to go into that kind of area, the formation of a portfolio from the 6 months of the accelerator, the various projects you'd be undertaking, culminating in the final employer project. So working with real data as set by an employer. ThoughtWorks for our first cohort to work on a real data problem, and being able to demonstrate practical skills and how one can make, say, a real world impact, I think that is something that other kinds of perhaps more standard academic programs struggle to do. Hopefully that's offers some insight to that question. Then one from Anonymous. That's a great name, Anonymous. Dr. Abdey, I like the formality. I love that. I'd love to hear about the differences between data analytics and data science. Is it just about the size of the data sets? Ooh, good question. Good question. Well, all good questions. I mean, if one had to offer up definitions of, let's say, data analytics versus data science, I mean, what answers would you get? It would very much depend on who was answering those questions. If I may, I'm going to pick up on the size of the data sets part of your question. And if I may, let me bring in the phrase big data, big data. Even that, I mean, I'm sure it's a term you've all encountered, but if one has to offer a definition of big data, again, different people would offer their different viewpoints on it. I'll give my 2 or 3 cents on it. We are surrounded by data. Another fun fact, it's been estimated that in the last 2 or 3 years, we as in humanity has probably collected more data digitally than in the rest of human history combined. You've probably heard about Moore's laws and growth in computational power. Well, just the sheer volume of data being collected. I mean, if we extrapolate that, if that trend continues, then let's say 3 years from now, if we imagine all data ever recorded up to today, that volume again could be generated in the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, a staggering volume of data. So there's no shortage of the volume, but to another question, critical skills or in-demand skills of data analysis. I mean, the shortage is not of data, but of the people to make sense of that data. So big data itself offers vast opportunities, but also many challenges as well. So in terms of the V's, literally the volume of data, the variety of data types, structured versus unstructured. Are you looking at sentiment from social media posts right now? I mean, in the UK, there's some dissatisfaction perhaps with the what's been going on in Downing Street's been dominating the news waves here. So is it trying to assess social media outrage? Is it structured data, nicely already arranged in a spreadsheet? So the variety, the velocity, literally the speed at which data is being collected. Also, one of mine I like is vanity of big data sets, is that when you start exploring them and trying to find relationships, the more times you look at doing things, inevitably you're going to make discoveries just by the sheer number of combinations of pairings of variables you may investigate. And there's a big danger of the big data era of that a sort of spurious result, or perhaps a false positives. And of course, just having the data infrastructure in place to deal with vast data sets. So data analytics versus data science, I would say, and this is more of an opinion rather than a sort of statement of fact. For me, data analytics, and hence this career accelerator in data analytics framed, not data science framed, is really more about drawing insights from data and a strong emphasis on the decision making that can be taken as a consequence. So, I mean, mini spoiler alert here. In course 1 of the Career Accelerator, a focus on Excel, so things like the pivot tables, also data visualization through Tableau, the construction of dashboards from which it's of course a great skill to develop the dashboards, but then also to communicate the key takeaways to, let's say, the ultimate decision makers in an organization, who may not necessarily be the data analysts actually producing those fancy charts. It's perhaps the senior leadership. And so a really good data analyst has excellent communication skills, whether that's orally through a spoken presentation, or whether it's written through, let's say, a summary report, an executive summary, say, of one's findings. So for me, data analysts, and the size of the data set, not so relevant here. It could be small, it could be large. gosh, our little poll there had 3 data points, 3 responses. By no means a big data set, yet there was already a few things we could deduce from it. So data analysts more on the insights which can be drawn, but potentially drawing upon quite large databases. And indeed, in course 1, having been immersed into the wonderful world of Excel, also looking at database management using SQL or SQL, depending on your personal preference of saying it. I quite like SQL, just more cute than SQL, but really think of it as like Excel for big data sets. Data science is perhaps focusing a bit more on sort of the IT side, the technology side of dealing with vast data sets. But in practice, maybe the lines get a little bit blurred. And in an organization, depending how big or small it was, maybe a role you took might actually traverse different aspects of what a data analyst might be expected to do versus a data scientist. So it's not clear cut. It's not a clear cut. So we deliberately decided to frame this as a data analytics career accelerator with a strong emphasis on how to do analysis, but also how to communicate the results of the analysis.
Amazing. Thank you so much, James. I feel like you've given us some really amazing answers. Were any of those questions out of left field for you?
Well, I said this morning. I was expecting the "what is your favorite color," but it didn't come up. So there we go. Fair. In case you're wondering, I'm going to say red because obviously the shirt I'm wearing, and the LSE red and Chinese New Year red.
Amazing. And do you have a new top tip to share with anyone who's watching? I know I've asked you this a few times in the past.
You have. Well, if I may, I'm going to recycle. This is a different audience. I'm going to recycle the top tip I gave in the AMA ARMA Ask Me Anything, wherever we call it, this morning. And I think it's a nice exercise. It's let's say a top tip. It's an activity framed as a top tip. And I think is a nice segue. I love that word as well. People seem to be using that a lot lately. To segue on from that last question about data analyst versus perhaps a data scientist. Just don't take all of this from me. Go on to some jobs website of interest, maybe even LinkedIn. So perhaps a nice, easy place. I'm assuming you are on there as a nice starting point. And just do little keyword searches for data analyst or Tableau, Excel, SQL, Python, R, data scientist, if you will, and just see right now what kind of job opportunities there are. And I think you would, by doing so, you'll be pleasantly surprised, not just at the number of positions, but also the variety of sectors where those positions exist. There's always perhaps tendency to perhaps be thinking like something like an e-commerce giant or the banking and finance sector. And indeed, such openings in those sectors exist, but it's far more widespread than that. In the charitable sector, in the public sector, in sectors that you perhaps hadn't anticipated, agriculture, for example, policy making. I mean, there's almost unlimited fields in which one can apply these skills. Such that if you know how to analyze data, it doesn't really matter whether the data is from a pharmaceutical company, data from surveys, transaction data, who bought what, from where, etc. The tools of analyzing the data are transferable across sectors. So wherever your career takes you, whether it's via a career accelerator or not, perhaps I will offer a top tip as well on top of this, is to do what you love, okay, and work in a sector that you are passionate about. And by doing so, I think it's never really a job, it's more enjoyment. I mean, I love what I do. It doesn't feel like a job. It's just almost like a hobby of teaching and enlightening people about the joys of data analysis and how it can be, I think, a tool for good. I mean, yes, there's an awful lot of misinformation and abuse of data out there, but that doesn't mean we should just roll over and accept that. We should fight that and combat that in a non-lethal way, but combat that with objective data analysis and help people see the world as it really is and not through any perceptions they have of the real world. I think in all sorts of fields, people's perceptions versus the reality, there's usually a massive gulf between them. And I think a force for good for data is to try and reduce that perception reality gap, such that when people make decisions, whether it's voting decisions or in whatever domain, if people are basing decisions on reality rather than their perceptions of reality, and I hope, aspirational here for a better world of decision making longer term.
Thank you so much for that. I love that tip, especially how broadly applicable it shows data analytics to be as a skill, from marketing to HR to anything. I think that's what surprised me the most and what I've learned the most about data analytics over the past few months. So thank you, James, for your time today. Thank you for answering all of the questions we had for you. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop me an email, or actually there's a feedback form in the chat below. You can just pop your feedback in there. And yeah, we hope to see you at future events, and I hope you all have an amazing evening. Thank you all.
Okay, take care, stay safe everyone, and remember data analysis, it's not just for a career accelerator, I'll say it's for life.